It is One Soccer Today for this Friday, February 16th with the boys, Gareth Wheeler, Jordan Wilson, and Oliver Platt. I am Adam Jenkins, here to discuss many things, including where we will begin the broadcast that is already and right on time off the rails. The signing of Woobens Pacius, one of the best strikers in CPL history. We knew he was leaving. He announced on social media, but we didn't know where. And then about 10 days ago, some social media sleuths had discovered that Nashville SC had added Woobens to their roster page online. Well, today the deal was made official. We know that Woobens is headed to link up with former CPLer Lucas McNaughton as Nashville prepares for their next MLS season, and also their trip to CONCACAF Champions Cup that begins in less than a week. They will begin against Mocha of the Dominican Republic on Thursday. I did some sleuthing of my own. He is not on the preliminary roster, the large roster that all teams have to submit, so maybe not eligible for the first tie, but, Oliver Platt, as I ask you if Woobens Pacius can have an immediate impact, is it possible we see Woobs make his MLS debut or his MLS club debut against Lionel Messi in Inter Miami in the next round of Champions Cup?
Who knows? Possibly. I think it's probably going to take some time here for him to kind of stake his claim to a place in the first team. It's encouraging that he's been signed to the first team roster and not to the Huntsville MLS Next Pro team. I would imagine it's still a possibility that he spends some time with that side and gets some minutes there. It's a good team, Nashville. Obviously, they've had some success bringing in Canadians, and that sets a good precedent for the to encourage them to continue to do so, particularly from the Canadian Premier League with Lucas McNaughton. So that bodes well. But I do think this is one where you're going into a strong team with some good options up front. You're going to have to be a little bit patient to get your opportunity, but it is a good opportunity for Woobens Pacius to take that next step in his career. So I'll be looking forward to watching him hopefully get some minutes in MLS this season.
Gareth, do you agree?
First off, as much as I love me some Lucas McNaughton, yeah, give Jacob Schaffelberg a shout out here. What's going on? Are you anti-Nova Scotia?
No, I was making the CPL reference with McNaughton.
We can mention the other quality Canadians or Canadian ties. Danny Lovitz, former
right.
CF Montreal player, to a lesser extent, son of Alec Bunbury. Teal Bunbury all play in Nashville. Look, it's a low-risk move for Nashville and a big chance for Woobens Pacius. Do I think he's going to have an immediate impact? Absolutely not. Does that mean that things can't change over the course of the season? No, of course they can. He just needs to go and prove himself. Look, they have Sam Sturridge in attack. Hani Mukhtar, one of the best players in all of Major League Soccer. There's some decent attacking talent in this team. So we'll see what his role is specifically. I would suggest practice some patience whenever a big Canadian signs or a Canadian with promise signs somewhere. It's not linear. It's rarely straightforward. So just be patient with this. He's 22 years of age. Didn't have a great season last year with Forge, but you saw the potential. You saw glimpses of what he can be. I think the job now in Nashville is for him to find that little bit more of consistency that at the next level, they're going to demand it on a regular basis. So congratulations on the move. Good step. We'll see how much or if he plays. Then we'll spend time with the second team. Let's just see how that plays out. But my expectations out of the gate are low.
Jordan, we know as the Canadian soccer community that every time a player makes that step up, and the CPL has been very transparent from the beginning that they want to be a develop and move on type of league. So every time we see a young Canadian do that, the whole community comes together and is supportive, especially the former players like yourself who have either played with or against these young men making these moves. What I think is within this conversation that's worth noting is that Woobens is a Quebec guy. No CF Montreal, TFC don't come knocking. No Vancouver Whitecaps come knocking. And this is something of a recurring theme here with these signings is often the players, not always. We have seen some CPL guys get shouts with TFC, with Vancouver, but it seems like the gamble that the clubs make, especially when the players are getting consistent minutes, is they're going to an American club. Why do you think that is?
Oof. There's a lot in there. First, I'll say with the CPL, I think there's no perfect league, but I think it's the perfect situation for young players. Wheels, we were just talking about this the other night, but how if I could start over, if we could start over, first I'd want to sign the same club with you, Wheels. Hold it down. Yeah. You can play the 6, I'll play in the back, whatever.
Championship winning team, that would be.
Just the opportunity, pay me whatever, pay me Skittles, but just the opportunity to play in your backyard, but not in a dinky league. Like, This is not you going, no disrespect to other countries, but going to third division somewhere, games aren't televised, there isn't media coverage. Maybe you're playing here and there, but no one really knows what time. This is a professional league. We know when you're playing, you know the teams that you're playing. It's a place where you can go and develop. A player like Woobens Pacius, 3 years he's put in a shift, and he's a Quebecois, was playing there, but then has to go to Forge, but has that opportunity to develop. I think we're going to see more of that, more players going to Canadian MLS clubs specifically, but just making that move, because now you have a CPL, you have a product where guys can go and get better. I think you're just going to see a bit. I think people are usually slow to the party, right? Maybe once you see one name or two names or three names, it takes you a while to catch on. But I think that also has to do with a lot of how certain clubs are run. Like CF Montreal is run totally different than how Toronto FC is run, and the big dogs behind the desk are making these decisions. But I think the talent you can't ignore. I think you're going to see more and more in year 7, year 8, year 9 of the CPL of players going to MLS Canadian clubs, but just MLS clubs in general.
Well, they're not going immediately back to Canadian clubs because there's already pre-existing relationships there. They know most of the players that are in their own backyard. If they overlooked you once, then they might not want to go right back there immediately next time. It's not unprecedented. Like Lucas McNaughton signed for Toronto FC, a team that was in need of a domestic player, and there was a fit, and it made a lot of sense at that time. I think that part of the reason why these players don't end up back with Canadian clubs is somewhat to do with the contracts that are being offered. I know a number of CPL players that have been offered second team contracts with Canadian MLS teams or other MLS teams across the United States as well. And some setups and some situations based upon relationships are worthwhile to take the risk. Mo Farsi, like he started with Columbus Crew too and worked his way into the first team. Jason Russell Rowe, the same thing because of a pre-existing relationship with Corey Ray, at least in Russell Rowe's circumstance. So if you're not guaranteed or given a first team contract, a lot of CPL players will look to Europe, look to somewhere else, because MLS Next is relatively new. It's relatively young. And I think there's right now the Canadian Premier League, it's much more established. And I'd like to see Canadian MLS teams utilize the Canadian Premier League system, especially as the league expands, to give some of their young talent a run at a professional level, at a really good level within this country, and see if they can exist and see if they want to bring them back into their first team setup. So I still think we're 5 years in. We're really young. Part of it's contractual. Part of it's ego, part of it's the player's preference as well.
Ollie?
Yeah, I think all of those things are true. I do think there is, I don't know if ego is the right words in this particular sense, but there is a part of it where I don't think it reflects particularly well on these teams as clubs with the amount of money they're putting into their academies. If the best Canadian players or better Canadian players can be found by signing players from the CPL, right? I just think there's always going to be an instinct in these clubs to say, no, we want to give our academy kids a chance. We want to promote them before we go to someone else, a player someone else has developed, right? Even if they're still Canadian, even if they're local. So I think that somewhat plays into it. Other than that, it's not something that particularly bothers me anymore. I think there's a big world out there. There's a lot of other MLS clubs. There's a lot of other good leagues around the world. Plenty of CPL players nowadays going and finding success in Europe as well. I don't think we need to be wrapped up in 3 clubs in a world that has hundreds of good options for these players. So, I'd much rather see, and this is going to be part of hopefully the ecosystem we create in this country and the education we create for young agents coming up in this country, developing those relationships in different places and finding good fits for their players and what might be better fits at times rather than just fixating on 3 teams here in Canada. So it's something that, doesn't really concern me maybe as much as it did in the early years, where you're kind of keen to see that the young CPL players get that opportunity at the big Canadian clubs, so to speak.
Well, we wish Woobens all the best in the next chapter of his career. Gav, should we get one last whoop whoop from you?
Whoop, whoop. You're going to hear a lot of it. Hopefully he grows his way into this team, so he can do it on a regular basis. Woo, woo!
Thank you. You limped in with that first one. There we go.
Thank you, Gareth, and congratulations again to Woobens.